Hello, everybody. Welcome to Glitters of Life podcast. I'm your host, Rohit Kokane, and we are back with another exciting episode. And this time we have got Jessica Rabon, who is licensed psychologist, podcaster, and content creator. Well, a lot she is doing. So today we are going to talk about like how to be present without self-judgment or criticism, which is important to achieve our goals. And we are totally eyeing to achieve those goals, and also how to break those patterns of negative self-talk and ways we have to use to stop that external judgment to which hampers our growth as well. Like, so it is a kind of a measure or the progress or the achievement that we are trying to do. Negative self-talk can always be a kind of a barrier or the hurdle, and we are going to have an amazing conversation on this. And I welcome Jessica on the show. It is such a pleasure to host you.
Thank you so much for inviting me and having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Great. So as I said earlier, Jessica, you have been doing a lot. So what keeps you going?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. Um, I think from a global perspective, like not even just thinking of my role as a psychologist and content creator, like my family keeps me going. Knowing I'm making a difference keeps me going. But with, specific to being a psychologist, my clients keep me going. I want to show up for them. I love seeing their progress with regard to creation and podcasting. I just truly love it. So since it's something I love, I would just want to keep doing it. And I also have learned over time to allow myself to take breaks, which has really helped me keep going, honestly. Because when I first started, I was like, go, go, go. And then I would burn out. And I'm like, it's okay to take breaks, recharge, and then, go back to it because I love putting out mental health information.
Absolutely. And it is helping each and every individual because I tend to consume your content through threads and all the platforms through your podcast as well. So it's always a healthy conversation. But when growing up, did you have the best environment to pursue these dreams? Because most of the people don't have, or did you need to set them aside for a different purpose in life? What was the scenario?
Yeah, so growing up, I definitely recognize I had a lot of privilege. I grew up in a two-parent household. All my basic needs were met, and I honestly didn't plan on going into psychology. So I was actually a chemistry major going into college, and I did that for 2 years. My freshman year of college, my cousin died by suicide, and that shifted my career path. Not initially, but it did. But when I decided to go into psychology, my family was supportive, but I was definitely nervous to tell them because they were like, psychology, what are you going to do with that? Like chemistry, you're going to go to pharmacy school. And so I definitely had support to achieve my goals, but my path wasn't necessarily linear. This was not something I knew I wanted to do as a young child by any means. It wasn't until I was 19 that I was like, oh, that psychology thing, maybe I'll try it out. But I definitely recognize my privilege and that I had a lot of opportunity and familial and friendship support to allow me to pursue my
Absolutely.
dreams.
Yeah. And it's always good to have that kind of a transition because we all want to do something that we love. Those situations, those moments might not be the favorable one or the bestest of at that particular moment, but it's all our gut and the kind of confidence that we have got in ourselves that we can surely pursue this and make a big out of that particular industry. That is something that we have to resonate with. And
Mhm.
it's more like you said about being nervous or like communicating that particular thing to your parents as well. So
Yeah.
when we talk on a general terms, like how to communicate through the differences with the parents and children, because that is something that most of the people struggle with, because right now it is getting totally very dynamic, Jessica. We have seen that
Mhm.
like the children want to have their own career or their path of life, and they want to be in a very different zone. So in
Yeah.
terms of psychology, how this scenario setups, and what would be your take on it?
Specifically like communication
Yeah,
and kind of the
right.
children breaking free. Yeah, I mean, I think I do a lot of values work, and I think a lot of it comes down to the values of the family, values of the parents, values of the child. And when I say child, I mean young adult
Yeah,
as well. And So I think a lot of times growing up, and regardless of background, as kids, we take on the values of our parents. So we might say,
Yeah.
like, oh, my parents want me to be a doctor, so I'm just going to be a doctor. And then they realize, oh, I don't really like this, or this doesn't really align with who I am. And that can be a hard conversation when it comes to like communicating your wants and needs. Especially, I always tell people, parents or guardians are probably the hardest people to communicate your needs with because you don't want to disappoint the people that raised you. So yeah, I think it comes down to like expectations, value alignment, but when it comes to like how to communicate those things, communication is hard, but I think, bringing up, hey, I know this is what you want from me or expect from me, and I appreciate everything you've done. And this is really where my values lie. And this is where my heart aligns. And this is why I want to do these things. And it can be multiple conversations because I've definitely worked, because I primarily work with teens, worked with individuals who maybe need to communicate things a few times to their parents, or maybe parents need to,
Right.
take a few times to communicate, like, this is what we want from you. But yeah, from a psychological perspective, I think that divergence really just comes down to values. And also the fact that a lot of us we're growing up in different times than our parents, right? So like we're from very different, most of us come from a different generation from our parents.
Right.
So, and for at least me, there's a whole generation in between, like my parents' age and my
Right.
age, same with me and my daughter. So we also have to remember, like, as parents, maybe what we want for our kids is based on our perception of how we grew up and not what's out there now, like social media. Oh my gosh, we could probably talk about social media influences for hours, or communication via social media. Like it's just a different world. Hopefully that answered what you were asking.
Right. And it has changed drastically because when I was growing, there were not a lot of resources. We used to play
Mhm.
in grounds and just this normal schooling. But right now, these days, kids are exposed to various things. And they have got the mobile phones, the laptops, iPads, television, and whatnot. So that is something that gives the boost to their vision as well. And so that they'll be
Mhm.
having more and more questions. And it becomes harder to let parent understand that what they are looking forward to. So that is something that usually
Yeah.
happens, and your perspective towards that really matters, because then people are, and I like that particular point of having multiple conversation, because it's not that we can easily absorb everything in that one conversation. It's more about like um, we can reassess it. If it is working, then it is fine. If it is not, what's going wrong and all that can be tracked out there. And talking about having those perspectives, like each and every individual might be having, so how do you find your perspective? And while finding that, we have to get less self-absorbed in certain situations. So what has been your
Oh.
go through journey?
Oh, I love this question of how to find our perspective. And I know you just asked like my journey. I think for me personally, and then I'll talk broadly, finding my perspective really involved me opening my eyes and learning from people different than me. Because especially, I mean, and I kind of alluded to this, as we're growing up, we learn from our family, like,
Yeah.
and then our peer group, but initially our family, our values, things like that. And then once you start kind of gaining that independence and seeking out perspectives or information that may challenge what you were previously taught, it's honestly a lot of trial and error too. Like, even, the perspective shift of me going from being a chemistry major to psychology, like, it took me taking a psychology course after the loss of my cousin to be like, do I actually like this? So I think for me personally, developing my perspective on various topics came from actively seeking out information that contrasts what maybe I was taught or what I believed. And I think globally speaking of how can somebody find perspective, I don't want to say my way is the only way, but I do think talking to people that may have different perspectives than you, I mean, that's part of what I do in therapy. People bring things. My job is not to give advice, but, have you thought about it this way? Or what would it look like if you challenged that thought this way. Um, Gaining new experiences when you can. I mean, we know that we don't grow staying in our comfort zone, right?
Right.
We don't grow staying in a bubble. And many people live their life that way because it is much more comfortable. And so I don't blame anybody for doing that. But if you truly want to gain perspective about the world, your beliefs, your values, whatever it is, I would encourage anyone to really step out of that comfort zone, seek out information, seek out people, experiences. Even if you're like, I think I would hate this experience, but let me try it and see what I learn from it.
Right. It's more of that, like once you have that gut feeling of stepping out of that particular comfort zone, then we might be interacting with a lot of people. I love to do that. And this podcast
Mhm.
is one of the reason that we are now exchanging this conversation. I'm going to learn a
Yeah.
lot from your insights so that you'll be able to understand what kind of perspective you should be having to certain situations or moment. That is how we start learning. And at times you
Mhm.
have to unlearn as well. If it is not suiting you, then you have to make forward like what could be the other way of doing that. But
Mhm.
again, Jessica, you said that when we have that kind of conversation with the other people, or try to read a lot or watch something, or write as well, we tend to develop those newer perspectives. But while doing that, we have to be present in the moment as well, because there are certain situations or moments that have haunted us or might be hurting us as well. It could
Yep.
be our past, it could be about the recent failure as well. So
Mhm.
what would be the bestest way to be present in the moment?
Oh my gosh. So I always go to like mindfulness, like present moment awareness. So I am super big on self-compassion, and one of the components is mindfulness. So if we're thinking like basic steps to be in the present moment, you have to be free from distractions.
Yeah.
So at the very basic, like turn off the phone or put it away, like you can't be present if you have so much stimulus around you. And I mean, that's just life right now. We already covered how like life has changed so much. You mentioned, kids these days have
Yeah.
access to so much information. Like we are constantly getting input from all aspects. Like I don't know about you, but I'm one like I might have a movie on, but then I'm also on my phone and then I might be like having a conversation. Like that's not being present. So basic level, you know, reduce distractions as much as possible. And then I would also encourage people to like be aware of what am I thinking? How am I feeling in this moment? Even like positionally from a body standpoint, like getting in a comfortable position so you're not distracted by like, oh, my back hurts, or like I'm sitting on my foot weird and it's falling asleep. Um, and just being aware of like what thoughts are coming up, what feelings are coming up for me. And if you find yourself, my mind's wandering to this other thing, catch that. I think awareness is the first step of pretty much anything. Like you can't change a behavior. You can't be present if you're not aware of what's going on in the moment. Um, so yeah, minimize distractions and then really focus in on what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And I guess the third thing would be if you find yourself your mind wandering or getting distracted, that's probably an indication you need to take a break from whatever you're doing and then reset.
Yeah.
Because if you're thinking about your to-do list while you're trying to focus on a task and be very present, you're not going to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Those are fantastic tips, I would say, because it's more about like how you want to unwind yourself. And you
Yeah.
can choose your way of mindfulness. It doesn't have to be a kind of a, you have to do meditation, you have to journal. It could be any way that suits you the best so that it can bring better results. And Jessica, you have been into podcasting as well. So it
Yeah.
would have been a great experience for you to have those conversations, to put out your knowledge and wisdom to the use as well, so that others can learn from it, others can feel acknowledged. So it's more about the voice, and
Mhm.
how do you allow your authentic voice to be heard through that or whatever content you create, because people these days carries a lot of burden into their heart and the mind as well. They won't
Mhm.
be going ahead and saying those words or the statements. They have to express themselves. So
Mhm.
how do you do that?
Oh gosh. Okay. I think to show up authentically, the first step is not worrying about what other people are going to think, which is so hard. But you can't, I mean, it's true. Like, if you want to show up as your authentic self, you can't be worrying about the judgments of other people, right? Because that's going to put a barrier up there. So I think one, letting go, or, it's okay to be nervous. Like, I definitely put some things out there that I'm like, people probably won't agree with me, but that's okay, because that gets to the next part of what is true to myself, going back to
Hmm.
values. What are my values? Why is it important for this to be heard? Why do I want to say this thing? Whether it's me making a podcast episode, putting out content on social media, or somebody listening that just wants to speak their truth in a one on one conversation. Like, why is it important for me to say this thing? Does this align with who I am or the person I want to be? And how will I handle if I get negative feedback? And that's okay, because we can't control what other people
Right.
say. If people don't like your authentic self, and it can be scary, absolutely scary to put your authentic self out there, but you're also not going to be happy if you're living inauthentically. If you're hiding behind this facade or wall, it's not going to feel aligned with who you are. And I would argue that many times when we're not being authentic, it's because we're allowing the opinions or judgments of other people to guide our
Yeah.
behavior rather than our values, our beliefs, our desires, anything internal to us. But it's scary and it's hard.
Right, it is. And
Yeah.
when we look from the other people's perspective or the opinion, it becomes very scary, because
Yeah.
most of the times we cater to their judgment. We are trying to prove something to someone, but it's more about like if you are able to improve rather than proving, that would be much more beneficial for us and them as well, because
Yeah.
they won't be coming to us and we'll be saving a lot of time, which we can put into like upgrading ourselves or upskilling ourselves. And most of the times I feel that when we are into conversations with other people, we get into those moments where we start feeling that it would have been very hard for them, or they might have enjoyed that particular moment of success or so. So do you feel or do you believe that it could be challenging to walk in someone else's shoe?
Oh, it absolutely can, because we all have different lived experiences and different perspectives. And I love what you said there. Like, sometimes we're in a conversation and we worry about what the other person
Yeah.
is thinking and feeling. And I think anybody that has empathy or compassion probably does that if it's a difficult conversation. And I think it's a balance of, it's okay to worry about that, but we also can't consume that
All right.
worry, because we're not responsible for the reactions of others. But even hearing you say that, like, and asking the question about, is it difficult to walk in somebody else's shoes? Yes. And with conversation, if you are worried about that, have another conversation. Ask, like, hey, I left that conversation worried about how you took it. Like, are you okay? Can we follow up on that? Because otherwise, we're then just projecting. We're just
Yeah.
like, well, I'm assuming this person did this or felt this way because of this, but we don't actually know because we're not them, right? We don't have their lived experience unless they like explicitly told us
Yeah.
like that was a hard conversation. But yeah, I mean, I think it can be hard to walk in other people's shoes, and it's okay to try to see things from their perspective if you recognize you'll never fully 100% know, because we all come with our own histories.
Yeah. So Jessica, you're talking about the assumptions, or like we tend to assume. So it's more about those understanding. Like, are we understanding their situation or ours as well? So it always
Mhm.
comes with the limitations. Why is it so? Is there any kind of a psychological theory behind like why understanding ourselves or someone comes with the limitations?
I don't know of any psychological
Okay.
theory necessarily, but when it comes to like just challenge difficulty understanding ourselves or others, I mean, I think others is the easier one to tackle, because we only get from others what they put out there. So we don't actually know. Like, if somebody's angry, we can assume why they're angry, but unless they explicitly say this is why, we're just like filling in those gaps. We're making assumptions based on the data we have, and like our brain fills in the other information. With regard to understanding ourselves, I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, so much of our lives we spend taking on the values of other people. And it's not until you start challenging those values or beliefs that you can start gaining a sense of like, oh, like, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I definitely have, where I'm like, why do I even do this? Like, or why? And it could be something simple of like, why do I, you know, I don't know, put bread in the fridge, but other people keep it on the counter? Like, where does that come from? And until you start questioning these things, it can be hard to understand ourselves because we just do things because we assume that's what we should do or others have told us to do. Um, so yeah, even though there's no psychological theory, hopefully that's still
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
answered.
right. And it's more about, like, I was having this conversation with one of the person regarding to starting their podcast, and they were like, you have to question everything in this world. Whatever you are
Mhm.
doing, whatever you feel, you have to question it, because unless and until you won't question that particular moment or situation, you won't be getting answers, you won't be having the next steps. So that is something that we have to learn from those particular situations or the moments, because there might not be a theory, but again, our lived
Mhm.
experiences always gives us the path to get ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I love that you just said question everything.
right.
And I mean, I say that you've talked about like on social media, but I tell people that all the time. Like, yeah, I put that I'm a psychologist, that my credentials, I talk about it, but I still want people that consume my content to question where I'm getting it from. Because like if you follow information blindly, you're just gonna follow things blindly. So yeah, asking those questions also helps us better ourselves, our jobs, our families, things like that. Because if we don't question, we're just kind of going through the motions, and many of us can kind of be on autopilot. And then we look back and like, I've been doing the same thing for 5 years and I don't really know
Right.
why.
Yeah. And again, Jessica, it's more about we want to live with those insecurities. Most of the people do have, but they won't be expressing themselves. So,
Hmm.
does it ever happen with you that you tend to live with those insecurities? And if not, then how do you express those?
Oh, I mean, I definitely live with insecurity. I think
High five.
everybody does. I think everybody does. And anybody that says they never feel insecure is probably lying. But I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, we're all human. We're all going to have insecurities. I think the broader, I don't know, conversation here is what do we do with those insecurities,
Yeah.
right? Because we're all going to have them. We're all human. And it could be like global things that we feel all the time, like insecurity about, our abilities or the way we look, or it could be like moment to moment specific, like, oh, I made this mistake and now I'm feeling really insecure about, moving forward with this thing. So I think it's more about what you do with those insecurities, not in psychology, we have this word called rumination. So just like thinking about the same thing over and over and over again. And, if you're thinking about your insecurities over and over and over again, they're going to consume your life versus I have this insecurity. Is this something I want to focus my attention on changing? And
Right.
if yes, then take steps to do that. Or if you're like, actually, I think I can live with it, which is okay too. And I don't think that message gets put out there a lot. Like if it's something you can just kind of coexist with, like, yeah, I'm always going to be insecure that I am not as talented in music as my sibling, but it's also something that I don't really care to change about me. Don't have to change it. But if there are insecurities you have that are really consuming your life and you want to change, then the next step would be to figure out a plan on how to change it. But I think everybody has insecurities. And if people don't, they're not being authentic, to use your word from earlier.
True that. And again, we are human. We have to remember that we are not artificially intelligent people. We are intelligent. We are not artificial.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, no. I would not want to be AI either.
Uh, but when we are talking about the insecurities as well, there is this one thing that we have always been told, that you have to take those feedback and the criticism as well. It could be constructive as well, but then
Mhm.
at times more of the self criticism can hurt the self confidence as well. I've seen that because most of the time we are trying to improve ourselves. No, Rohit, you can do better. Jessica, this is not something that I was expecting from you. You can still do better. That is
Mhm.
something that we take it actively, but in the long run the self confidence gets harmed because it has been hammered by those criticisms. So why
Mhm.
does it happen with the individuals, like the self criticism? Why does that excessive thing hurts our self confidence?
Yeah. I tell people all the time that we are harder on ourselves than we would be on anyone else. Like, we all
True.
have self-critical thoughts. And some of us, if not most of us, probably have thoughts that we wouldn't dare to say to other people. So for whatever reason, I wish I had a great, beautiful scientific answer for this, but our brain is wired to focus more on the negative than it
Yeah.
is the positive. Those negative self thoughts, the negative experiences, things like that. And a lot of times, going back to, childhood and those messages, and you just brought it up, sometimes it's like criticism from other people, but then a lot of times it's from us. We internalize those messages from other people. So when we're a small child, if you get told like you're not good enough in a certain area, you're going to internalize that. And then as you get older, even if those people aren't saying that to you externally, that internal voice is going to say that to you. And then we also, our brain finds other things to criticize ourselves about. Like, I can think of times where I probably called myself names over like such a small mistake that I
Hmm.
wouldn't dare to ever say to someone else. I would be like, oh no, you made a mistake. No problem. Let's fix it and move on. But, my critical self talk might say, you're so stupid. How could you do that? Like, whatever comes to mind. So I think a lot of us just are wired to, unfortunately, be a lot harder on ourselves. The other thing is, we are the only person that knows our full internal experience,
Yeah.
our every thought, our every move, our every action. So there's much more opportunity for our brain to criticize what we are doing versus if we're just seeing someone out, you know, on the street, at work, in our home. We don't know what's every thought, feeling, etc. they have. But when we live with ourselves 24 hours a day, it allows our brain to criticize, also praise, but I don't think many of us are like, you did so good at putting the dishes up today. It's more like, why did it take you so long to put the dishes up or get your task done? But yeah, I think we all struggle with that. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but we don't have, even though we all have that self critical voice, we don't have to fall victim to
All
listening to it
right.
all the time.
It's more about taking those positives and then focus on it and move on. Don't dwell
Mhm.
into those situations that will do more harm than anything good. That is something that we have to
Absolutely.
understand. And Jessica, it's more about those situations can get challenging. And like right now, I'm talking to you as a licensed psychologist. I assume that you have solutions to each and every problem,
I try, but maybe not every
quote
problem.
unquote. But how to stay resilient in those challenging situations? How do you do that? And what would be, in general, suggestion for that particular question?
Yeah. So I think I know I said a few moments ago, like awareness is the first step. I agree with that here too. First, you have to be aware that you're having these thoughts. Because I think a lot of us like aren't, maybe we're aware we have a self-critical voice, but
Yeah.
we can't be resilient against it until we realize how present that voice is, right? And like you said, there's so many negative outcomes, low self-esteem, things like that. So first step would be awareness of that voice. Second is learning how to challenge it. I know you said like focus on the positives, which is a great thing. Like, okay, yeah, I made this mistake, but I've done X, Y, or Z really well. Or you can actually, I teach people to talk back to their self critical voice. So it seems silly at first, especially if you're talking out loud. You might feel a little uncomfortable doing it.
Start
But
monologue episodes of podcast.
yes. But if your self-critical voice is telling you, well, like, why would you go for that promotion? You're not talented enough, you're not skilled enough, you're not worthy enough. Identifying where are those beliefs coming from? Is that coming from insecurity? Is that coming from your childhood being told that? Is that just coming from anxiety, self-doubt, whatever it may be? And then try to challenge with evidence that goes against it. Like, no, I'm just giving this example of a promotion, but
Yeah.
I already got promoted in this company, or my boss consistently tells me that I'm doing a great job, or I know that even though I would have to learn things, I'm really skilled in this, and start providing, I call it like evidence for, evidence against this self-critical narrative. And the more you start challenging the narrative, the more that you recognize those positives that you brought up, or recognize where is this coming from, the easier it is to identify when you have that thought come up. Oh, nope, that's not true. Sometimes you don't even need to challenge it. Like, if you practice this awareness and practice challenging it, sometimes thoughts will come up and just, you're like, that's a ridiculous thought. That's not even true. And you're able to move on. But it does take that active practice to get there. Um, and then some people too may not want to challenge it, but going back to your resilience question, is how can I still coexist with this and live my values out? So this is pulling from ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and it's more just recognizing that you have that thought. Okay, I had that negative thought, and I could sit and try to challenge it or ruminate on it, or I can recognize the thought was there and just move on with my goal directed behavior. You know, the thought came up when I was practicing an instrument or sport. I could stop, give up, or I could be like, okay, that thought was there, but let me continue pursuing my goal. And the theory behind that is the more that you live the goal directed, value driven behavior, those thoughts will still pop up, but they're not going to be as present because you're still focusing on that end goal. So those are some ways I would encourage people initially to kind of build that resilience with this self criticism.
Love that. That was really insightful. This is the first moment that I felt that I'm talking to psychologist. Otherwise, it was really a friendly conversation that is we are having.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was
Pulled some
taking.
therapy skills out there.
I was just listening to it very carefully because that was something new for me as well, and it was
Mhm.
really insightful, so that people can learn from it as well. And we have been interacting with a lot of people. We tend to meet with a lot of people. We try to grow that inner circle as well, but
Mhm.
at times we trust the wrong people as well, and they have adverse consequences on our life. That usually
Yeah.
happened with me as well. I'm not sure did it happen with you as well. But
Oh,
uh,
yeah. There's definitely people in my life that I was like, mm-mm, looking back now.
my simple theory is that I would cut off from those people the
Mhm.
moment I realize that they are not trustworthy. So,
Mhm.
how we can avoid those situations, and what would be the right way of building the right inner group filled with the trust?
Oh, I love this question. So I wish there was like 100% foolproof way to be like, this is the formula and this is how you
Right?
don't get hurt. That would be so lovely. But kind of what you just said there, like when you realize, okay, these people aren't good for me, cutting them off. One thing I ask people, whether it's with people or just situations, does this thing drain me or does it excite me? And if you're finding you're around people, even if the first couple meetings, maybe you don't really know them well, but you're like feeling exhausted or drained, and not like I had so much fun, I need to go like home and rest, but like this person is like draining to be around, or I don't feel really connected to them, that's probably a sign like, this is probably not going to be the best person for you. I know I've talked about values a ton, but I love values work. And I think finding people that align with similar values, and that could even just be, if you really love a certain sport, seeking out friendships or people that also hold that value. So there's that commonality. Building trust, I think, is so individualized.
Yeah.
Going back to being authentic, one thing I tell people all the time, if you show up in your authentic self and somebody does not accept you for who you are, that's a red flag right there that they're not going to be the people for you. I mean, and it could be sharing something very simple, it could be sharing something deeper for you. But if people aren't willing to accept you for who you are, like, don't invest your time in them. And that's easier said than done. I realize I oversimplified that. I'm thinking more like on the initial developing the circle. And boundary setting, I think, is another one. So, like you said, when you were talking, we have our inner circle. Maybe you spent time trusting them, but then you realize, like, oh, they're not they're not good for me. The willingness to set boundaries, whether that's fully cutting them off or saying, like, hey, we can hang out once a month, but I can't really do more than that. Or, I'll talk to my friend about this, but these topics are off
Yeah.
the table because they're not receptive or they're mean to me anytime I bring that up. Yeah, those are my initial thoughts. I probably have more as well, but I'll let you jump in there.
Interesting one, because uh, it's really a kind of a process, I would say, or the more
Yeah.
you get those kind of people, the better you try to understand how I have to deal with them, because each
Mhm.
and every person comes with different characteristics. We can't apply the same logic with each and every individual. It's more about
Yeah.
do we have to give them a second chance, or how we are communicating our ethics or the values of living life, so that we can be on the same page. But that doesn't usually happen. And during all this process, like, I feel that we are passing those critics, like, so how can you escape the self-imposed role of being your own harshest critic, I would say?
I
Tough
want
one.
to say, like, no, that is a tough one because, like, can you? I never want to talk in black and white, so I want to say, yeah, like you can no longer be your harshest critic. And I go back to we live with ourselves 24/7, so you might still be. I think how I would I don't know, I guess answer that question is we can lessen the impact of being our harshest critic. Because I think, like I said, talking or being with yourself 24/7 and also taking on the messages we've received from other people, like it would be hard to criticize others more than probably we criticize ourselves. And if you do, you probably are not a person many people want to be around. Um, but I think we can definitely lessen the impact of how hard we are on ourselves and have a more balanced view. So maybe we're not self-critical the majority of the time, but we still have that criticism that pops up here or there, or reframe it as, like, instead of being criticism, more like motivation to change and do better. Because beating ourselves up is not going to motivate us to change. But if we're noticing, like, oh, I'm really critical of this aspect of my life, I don't like just being really hard on myself all the time. What can I do to change it?
Yeah.
So that was a really hard question. I liked it
Right.
though.
Shaped your perspective, I would say.
Yeah.
Always good to have that kind of a feeling that we are asking different questions and rolling that conversation. I'm totally enjoying it, Jessica. I hope it is the same case with you.
Yes, absolutely. No, I am. You're asking very thought-provoking questions and making me really think.
Cool to know that. And how to find that mindset which can help us to improve, because
Mhm.
we are focusing more on the positives. We are trying to get better than what we were yesterday, and it's always
Yeah.
a ongoing journey. So what has been your way of improving your mindset? What kind of resources, what kind of things that you consume to grow with that positive mindset and have that growth into your own life?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. I feel like this one is one I can maybe answer better, hopefully. Um, I think, I mean, it's so dependent on people. Like, everybody is nuanced, but I think having goal-directed behavior can really help change the mindset. Like focusing on, once again, values, but what are your long-term goals? What is holding you back from
Mm-hmm.
achieving those goals? A lot of times it is that self-criticism, like you said,
Yeah.
or those people around us that are making a negative influence on us, maybe explicitly or implicitly telling us we're not good enough or doing enough. It's that awareness I've already talked about, being aware of where we are right now and who we want to be, being aware of those things holding us back, that self-critical thought. And I think also having flexibility. I think flexibility is really important when it comes to having a more like positive mindset, because not every day is going to be great, right?
Yeah.
I know you said we each want to do a little better than we were yesterday. And some days are just hard, and not seeing that as like, oh, I've totally failed. Because I think a lot of us, we have one setback and we perceive it as a failure rather than recognizing, like, okay, that was a bump in the road, or like, I just had a really bad day and that's okay. But like, overall, am I still working towards the goals? With regard to goals, I also encourage people a lot to like break down into really small, tangible tasks. Because if, you know, we want to achieve this big goal and that's the only goal we have, and we feel like it's taking forever to get there, or self-criticism is holding us back, we're not going to be positive about achieving it. We're going to be like, this is going to take forever, or we're going to quit. Versus setting small, tangible goals that make us feel successful. So then when that self-criticism comes up, we can say, hey, no, I was able to do X, Y, or Z. Or, yeah, maybe reaching this goal took a little longer, but I did it. And, or maybe I've talked about this with a lot of people when we set goals for therapy. If they come back and they're like, actually, I didn't meet that goal. Okay, it's not a you thing. Let's reevaluate why maybe that goal wasn't right for you. Or, was the frequency not right? Or does it not actually align with who you are? Because sometimes we set goals and we do them because we think that's what we should do. And then we start doing it and we're like so not motivated and we give up. But instead of realizing, like, oh, maybe that goal wasn't for me, we go back to that self blame, that self criticism. So, yeah, cultivating a positive mindset, I think a lot of times is being aware of what's holding us back. It's being flexible, and it's being goal directed and value driven, to kind of summarize all my ramblings there.
I could resonate with about having those tangible goals. And when I started with my YouTube channel way back in
Mhm.
2017 or so, I was not pretty sure about it. Like, do I have to
Yeah.
pursue this goal? I was studying at that moment as well, and it was just a kind of a fascination because I was always attracted towards this technology and the gadget thing. So I thought I'll be doing that particular thing as a content creator, but
Yeah.
it never resonated with me in the long run. I did record episodes. I was having very limited resources. Those were not top notch, but still I made an effort. But that wasn't connecting with my inner thing. Like, I wasn't satisfied with it. But when I started with the podcasting, I could deeply resonate with the medium. That is where I
Mhm.
felt that this is my calling, and that is the reason I
Yeah.
started it as a kind of a side hustle, and I'm still continuing it. So you just have to understand from this moment, and whatever you said about that, if it resonates with you, if you feel doing it for a longer period of time, it would be more enjoyable, and then you'll be able
Yeah.
to accomplish that goal as well. And I feel that each and every person tries to do a lot of things, but at times we have to unlearn those things as well. So if you have
Mhm.
to unlearn something from your past, what new knowledge or skill you would want to acquire right now?
Oh my goodness. Oh, you're putting me on the spot. Oh, I actually was having this conversation the other day with somebody about like, if resources and everything was available, what skill would I want to learn? And I really wish I took languages more seriously. I know that's like probably seems out of left field right now, but like I was privileged enough to like take Spanish and German and French and Latin throughout schooling, and I hated it. And now as an adult, I wish like I took that more serious or like actually practiced it more, um, because knowing multiple languages is very useful,
Yeah,
especially even like we were talking about like we connected over social media, specifically threads, and like you connect with so many people from all over the world, and like would it be nice to be able to communicate with so many people. I think that's what I would like to learn personally. But I want to go back to your comment about like unlearning things from our past. I just want to emphasize to anybody listening that unlearning is hard, because I think we uh, grow up and we just kind of go through the motions of things. But I think actually actively trying to unlearn something takes a lot of effort, but goes back to stepping out of that comfort zone that we talked about at the beginning of our conversation. Um, so unlearning's hard, and you're never too old to learn something new.
right. That is totally a thing. And you did talk about the languages. Here in India, we have a different language for each and every state. So that is something which is very fascinating. We don't speak
Yeah.
English or like Hindi all the time. It's more
Yeah.
about the region specific. So that could be a great experience if you want to visit India and then learn those
Yeah.
languages. You would totally
Yeah.
love that.
That no, that's awesome. I've learned that because I work in a hospital too. A lot of countries,
Yeah,
like even countries that speak Spanish as their first language have different dialects within the
right.
country, and things like that. So yeah.
Yep. And Jessica, coming on to the last part of this episode, we have talked about how to break those patterns of negative self-talk, how we
Mhm.
can achieve our goals by being not self-critical about whatever we have been doing. We are on glitters of life. So when we say glitters of life, what is that preliminary thought that comes to your mind, and how would you define that? Because through your perspective, through your thoughts, it would
Mhm.
definitely add some glitters to the mind of the audience as well, so that they can start thinking very differently. They can bring in the change, and their life would be on a positive path as well.
Yeah. When you say glitters of life, honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is that small moments that make life better. The small things that you can do or recognize, um, that just make, even if it's just like the day a little brighter. It doesn't have to be those big things. And hopefully, one, I appreciate your kind words of everything that you just said. Hopefully, people listening to this podcast will recognize, like, even with all the things that we talked about, it doesn't have to be these big changes. It can be those small steps. And that's what I think of the glitters of life. What are these like small things, whether they last a second, 5 minutes, that kind of just bring happiness or joy or make a positive impact?
Lovely. Because that is something that we have to focus on. And again, this conversation was totally on to the basic thing, because we tend to look on the fancy part of our life, like
Mhm.
how we can change things very drastically. But we forget to focus on the basics, because it's more about the perspective, it's more about the thought patterns that you develop, and how do you deal with them on continual basis. Because the life is same, each and every day will be bringing in new perspectives as well. The situations will be different, the people who we meet, and everything would be very different. So we just need the energy to face all these situations and the moments. And it's more about the learning approach that we have to develop. And your insights on each and every aspect of this particular conversations were very top notch. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and thank you so
Yes,
much for
thank you.
giving me this opportunity, Jessica. It has been a
No,
pleasure hosting you.
thank you so much for inviting me on and having me and asking so many thought-provoking questions. I loved it. I loved it so much.
Thank you so much. And if anyone wants to connect with this Jessica, I'll be attaching her social media links and the website thing in the episode description. You can totally check out from there and get in touch with her. And Jessica, I wish you a very all the best in your future endeavors. Stay happy, stay healthy. Bye bye. Take care.
Bye.